I'm Ranger Mike Gorman, one of the historians at the Richmond National Battlefield Park. And today, I'd like to talk with you about the James River, one of the most historic waterways in all of America, and one that has literally shaped the history not just of Virginia, but of Richmond itself. The James River begins its course from the mountains of Virginia, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and winds eastward all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. For thousands and thousands of years, human beings have looked to the James River for food and water. Native Americans established fairly large towns on the heights above the James River, all along its course. Here in Richmond, you can even see to this day visible remnants of Native American fishing traps, which still show up on the rocks of the James River. When Jamestown was established, the very first English and Native American contact took place near Richmond. But as time went on, Europeans increasingly moved west from Jamestown, further pushing the Native Americans away. This will result in many conflicts, including one near Chimborazo Hill. Why are people drawn here to Richmond? Well, quite simply, the James River itself. This is the head of navigation. This is as far as you could take a boat upriver. So it's not surprising that a city would grow up right at that spot. It's not surprising that this becomes, for most of the 18th and 19th century, the port of Virginia, and also the major port for the importation of slaves and every bit of goods coming from overseas. Why Richmond? It's quite simple. The James River. But as time went on, Richmond begins to grow and grow. Intense immigration flocking into the city. And because Richmond was the head of navigation, to get further west, Virginians built what became known as the James River and Kanawha, meaning the Kanawha River Valley, Canal. The idea behind this canal was to take packet boats west over the mountains and linking up by an inland waterway the Kanawha River, which leads to the Ohio, and the James. This would have made Richmond the New York City South. And from that moment, Richmond begins moving steadily into its industrial future. Starting in about the 1830s and continuing on through the 1850s, Richmond experienced an enormous industrial explosion. Over 50 factories made up the downtown area. Now this is remarkable because when people think about the South in general, prior to the Civil War, we think of plantation slavery. We think about cotton. We think about indigo. We think about agrarianism. We tend not to think about industrialism and the power that could be harnessed by factories. And here in Virginia and in Tennessee, the Upper South, that's what was going on prior to the Civil War. So if you were here in the 1850s, just imagine the sounds, the smells, all around. Industry, factories, smokestacks, iron mills, paper mills, woolen mills. Everywhere you looked, powered by the James River. As a ranger and historian here at the park, one of the questions we get asked all the time is why would the Confederates make Richmond their capital? It's only 100 miles from Washington, D.C. This should be a very quick affair, shouldn't it? The Union Army will just cross those 100 miles, come and take Richmond, and that's it. Well, the answer is the Confederates couldn't afford to lose it. The presence of the James River largely led the Confederates to make Richmond their capital, not just because of the opportunities for transportation that the waterway provided, but also because of the industrial power that it could harness. Water falling from the James River and Kanawha Canal could be harnessed by turbines that would power the Tredeger Ironworks, several flour mills, woolen mills. Everything a breakaway startup nation would need could be provided by the James River. In addition to the James River, you have 5 major railroads meeting here in Richmond. All the factories, the Tredeger Ironworks, cranking out cannon, steel plates for ironclads, the Virginia Manufactory of Arms, making small arms, pistols, swords, everything an army would need was here in Richmond. Anywhere else in the agrarian South does not have that capability. So it's not just the James, it's the railroads, it's the factories, it's the fact that Richmond is a political center already. So when the Confederates move in, they're inheriting this power. And in large part, that helps you understand how the Confederates were able to fight a 4-year war when Richmond was an industrial powerhouse. And it's why they fought so hard to keep it. In 1862, the Confederates have a real problem. A problem they didn't really anticipate. The success of their armies outside of Richmond during the 7 days battles resulted in huge numbers of casualties in the form of wounded men who had to be taken care of in local Richmond hospitals. But it also brought along over 15,000 captured United States prisoners of war. What do you do with them? The Confederates really didn't have a long-term plan. And somebody looked to the island in the James River called Belle Isle and decided this would make a wonderful place for a prison camp. At the time, it was thought that this would be a very temporary thing. The prisoners would come to Belle Isle, spend maybe a few weeks, and then be exchanged. Newspaper accounts from the time describe men frolicking on the rocks and having a good time. And why not? They knew that they would be going home soon. Only later, as the war grew harder and harder, did those opportunities for exchange evaporate. And now men will have to stay on Belle Isle through the winter, in the cold, with increasingly less and less supply. Terrible stories of starvation, of disease, sweeping through the camp. Men dying by the 10s and 20s every night. Belle Isle became notorious, north and south, as a place where you did not want to go. Long gone were the days of frolicking on the rocks, now replaced by men shivering in the winter night. The flat area that is now part of the James River Park system became the South's largest prison. Thousands of Union prisoners of war were kept there. And why would you want to make Belle Isle a prison? Well, it's in the middle of the river. The river itself is the wall of the prison. Guards filled the prisoners' ears with stories that there were deadly fish and that the rapids would sweep them away if they tried to swim across the James River. So unlike Libby Prison, which is famous for its large prison outbreak, there are very few accounts of men escaping from Belle Isle. It just didn't happen. But as we go today to Belle Isle, to walk our dogs, to frolic on the rocks, we always forget what took place here from 1862 to 1865. One of the few remaining industrial features of the James River waterfront to this day is the Tredeger Ironworks, most famous for what it provided to the Confederacy during those 4 years of Civil War. Over 1,000 cannon were cast here at the Tredeger Ironworks and saw battle, did their job, laid men in their graves. But of course, all this industrial power was not without its risks. The Confederates, with almost every available able-bodied man at the front, was left with a big problem. How do you supply these factories with laborers? Well, sometimes they use slaves, and in the case of the Confederate laboratory, where they were rolling cartridges and making anything explosive, it was staffed almost entirely by young women and girls. Tragically, Friday the 13th of March, 1863, an explosion occurred that took 50 young women's lives, all caused by the careless handling of a friction primer by one of those young women. By the mid-20th century, the James River, in large measure, was starting to die. Industrial runoff, coal ash, and all other manner of chemicals had more or less poisoned the James River, making it no longer a place where it was safe to eat the fish that came out of the river. The sturgeon had all gone away. At about this same time, Richmonders really began to realize what a treasure they have in their James River. And as the abandoned factories began to be cleared, regulations to prohibit the dumping of chemicals in the river took hold. And locals began the process of cleaning up their own river. The James River Park System was established around this time, putting in trails and scenic walkways, not just on Belle Isle, but along the river banks, making the river again a place that people would come and want to be once again. And now, just a beautiful place to spend an afternoon. This also pairs along with its innate power. Many times over the years, the river has flooded. It has crested very, very high, over 20 feet at one point. And in the 20th century, hurricanes Agnes and Camille, coming only a few years apart, forced people to rethink what the James River front would look like. Terrible flooding took place during these two events. Downtown Richmond was largely underwater, and in a long-term plan, the city responded by building the flood wall that you can see to this day. Since it's been there, the flood wall has never been used. But the day will come when the river will rise again, and it will be what stands between the power of the river and another devastating flood. As we've seen the incredible potential of the James River to supply water for industry and transportation, we always must remember its incredibly diverse history and incredibly diverse story. It is one of the most historic rivers in America. It became the site of the first permanent English settlement here in Virginia at Jamestown. It became the site for the first importation of slaves. It became the site of an invasion by Benedict Arnold's men in 1781. It became, here in Richmond, the port of Virginia. When Civil War came, the presence of the James River largely led the Confederates to make Richmond their capital. And now, Richmond's James River is one of our crown jewels. The industrial waterfront would have crumbled away if it were not for the efforts of local preservationists. To this day, as you go around downtown Richmond, you can still see boilerplate manhole covers that say Tredeger Ironworks. You can see ruins of the Old Dominion Iron and Steel Works that before the Civil War was cranking out kegs of nails that became incredibly useful to the Confederate government, and after the war continued to do the same thing. As you walk the trail at Belle Isle, you can see a rock quarry where for many, many years you could pull granite from the island itself and literally build Richmond atop the granite from the James River. You can even see remnants of a Confederate battery designed to protect the city. It's just chock filled with historical layers from many different eras. Today, you've got the Canal Walk, you've got the Tyler Potterfield Bridge, a footbridge over to Belle Isle, an extensive walking trail network managed by the James River Park System. People can kayak on the James, walk their dogs, and once again, the James River is the lifeblood of Richmond. The James River has continued to power, inspire, and surprise hundreds of generations of Virginians, and will continue to surprise us for hundreds of generations more. For Richmond National Battlefield Park, I'm Ranger Mike Gorman.